Is 132 revelation from God?
So I think that there is revelation in D&C 132. I think that, and I do think that it comes from Joseph Smith. And that...
Oh, okay, we might agree on that. You might be surprised to know that we agree on both of those points, but continue.
Okay. Now we might disagree on the specifics of sort of like which parts and so on, because so I think that, because I do think Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, and in our, I believe our next episode, we're going to go into like details of kind of like, well, why do I think that, right? And discuss our respective reasons for respective positions in detail. So when I look at Revelation, I see Revelation as always being filtered through the mind of a human being, a prophet, right? And so I don't see Revelation as just kind of like, it's all completely 100% divine, or it's all false, right? And so I look at, I don't know that I want to sort of religiously weigh in on what I think specifically is divine or not divine. I mean, maybe some things. In 132, like I do find the language that's used very problematic, right? So the language you were talking about the giving and taking, the sort of belonging or property.
For me, that doesn't come down to language. It's much deeper than language.
Language and concept.
The perspective. It's the mind that it came from. It's how does this consciousness view women and men and humanity?
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Fair enough. There are certainly things in 132 that I personally have problems with, but I don't reject 132 as a whole as revelation. So I do see the divine in it, and I think that it's coming from Joseph Smith. And like I said, I mean, like an actual sort of like set of sort of like, well, reasons like, why do you think that would be for our anticipated future discussion.
Okay, so can I ask? So let me ask another question, kind of piggybacking on that last one.
Sure.
So, did Joseph Smith dictate Section 132 as we currently have it to William Clayton in the presence of Hiram on July 12, 1843, in the upper room of the Red Brick Store?
I think he did.
So you accept that. So you think that the whole thing came from Joseph, and the problems that you have with it are where Joseph's mind got some things pure, some things not pure, and he said he dictated that. In so William Clayton's, you accept William Clayton's narrative on that. That's fine. I'm just trying to clarify.
So I mean, yes, like I would make the caveat that like I would accept the outlines of William Clayton's narrative on this. I would, per our previous discussion about historical sources,
sure,
would not treat him as some sort of absolute. I would try to take his account in the context of other accounts. And so
but the general sense that Joseph Smith did dictate this on that date, and it was written as we now have it. So it's not been tinkered with or adjusted. It's so I guess what I'm saying is you are kind of reserving the right to say, yes, that came from Joseph, but I don't have to accept all of it as revelation. He said all of it that day, but I can look at it and go, I'm throwing that part out personally. Am I understanding that correctly?
Basically. So okay. Yeah, I think that Joseph himself is an imperfect revelatory instrument, so to speak. And I think that the enormous pressure of the situation did not bring out the best in Joseph, and that gets reflected in how this revelation is dictated.
Okay. Okay. This is really helpful to help me understand your perspective too. So can I piggyback on that again?
Sure.
What other revelations of Joseph do you also take issue with, or do you reject partial portions of them or all of them, or is it just specifically
Oh,
132?
that's a good question. So, I mean, my same general sense that I bring to 132, I bring to Revelation in general, right? So through Joseph Smith, but also through other prophets, like in other books of script, in the various books of scripture, right? And so it's not, the way that I would frame it is not, oh, like I accept parts of certain revelations and then reject other parts. It's that because I see Revelation inherently as a kind of divine human co-creation, then I see in some places more of the divine and in some places more of the human. And so sometimes the human can be very problematic. I mean, I think that's easiest to see, like, let's say in like the Old Testament, right, where there are a variety of laws that seem horrendous, right, and so on. In Joseph Smith's revelations, specifically, like, what do I see? This is a good question. I mean, I would have to think about it, like places where I think that Joseph was like, well, okay, I think D&C 10 calls Martin Harris a wicked man and seems rather harsh toward Martin regarding the loss of the 116 pages. There are things in D&C 10 where I suspect that Joseph's own, like the human part of this human divine collaboration that is Revelation, I see places where maybe the human is more dominant, let's say. And so maybe sometimes there are certain revelations rebuking certain people, like in this case, Martin, that are overly harsh. And I think you actually have the same thing in D&C 19, again to Martin Harris. There's a narrative. It's controversial, but I have evidence. I have papers that I intend to publish that I've done research for. The papers are not fully written at this point, but about what's known as the Canadian copyright revelation. So for years, this was known only kind of by rumor, so to speak, historical rumor, you might say, like David, more than rumor, but like there were historical sources that said that in like early 1830, Joseph Smith had a revelation saying that they could finance the publication of the Book of Mormon. They could cut Martin Harris out of that process because Martin wasn't sort of cooperating sufficiently by selling a Canadian copyright, sending people up to Canada, Oliver Cowdery and others up to Canada to secure a Canadian copyright to the Revelation, to the Book of Mormon, which could then be sold, which would then produce more than enough revenue, it was thought, to pay off the printer for those books at the Grandin Press, right? Now, this revelation, Hiram Page was one of the people involved in going with Oliver Cowdery up to Canada based on this revelation. He wrote about it in the 1840s. David Whitmer remembered it decades later. Some historians disputed, Latter-day Saint historians disputed whether it had ever happened. And then a manuscript revelation book, it was disclosed, had actually been in the possession of the First Presidency, was handed over to the Joseph Smith papers like more than 15 years ago, I think. And so that revelation is now published, right? Joseph Smith, because the revelation had kind of not worked out for the people who were sent to Canada, they weren't able to find a buyer in the city that they were specifically sent to, and so on.
Yeah, okay, I remember this.
Joseph reportedly said he didn't intend to publish the revelation because there were problems with it. And it was not published in the Book of Commandments and the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants. So I have other things that I'll lay out in this paper indicating that Joseph himself did, in fact, think that the revelation was problematic. Now, I don't know that what he thought is, I think it's the way it's usually painted is he thought the whole revelation was a false revelation. I'm not convinced that's what he thought at all. I think actually maybe he thought that there were aspects of the revelation that came from his own mind that sort of bled into what was otherwise a divine communication. And so he chose not to publish it, you know.
I get that concept. He said that there are revelations of God, there are revelations of devil, and there are revelations of man, or whatever order he put it in. Okay.
Right. And I think maybe what happens is that revelations can be even, there can even be a blend of the human and the divine. I think there's inevitably a kind of blend of the human and the divine. And it's stronger in some places. You're dealing so clearly in Scripture, you're so clearly dealing with the divine. You're dealing with something that's so beautiful and transcendent and inspiring. And then in some places in the Scriptures, there are things that seem more strange or jarring, or like, so Latter-day Saints are not fundamentalists when it comes to those. They're not like Christian fundamentalists. We don't believe in the inerrancy of Scripture. The Book of Mormon says on its title page, right toward the end, you know, if there be faults, they be the mistakes of men, therefore condemn not the things of God, right? And so there is this sense in Latter-day Saint Scripture that Latter-day Saint Scripture itself does not have to be perfect, does not have to be free from error, does not have to be 100% divine in order to actually be legitimate.
Okay, I really appreciate that answer. Thank you. That was very thoughtful. And actually, I'm super impressed. I didn't mean to put you on the spot quite like that. And when you pulled out Doctrine and Covenants 10, and I'm like, wow, good, like that. Anyway, that was really impressive. I want to thank you for that sincere answer. I want to clarify, I wasn't asking it in order to try to trap you or trip you up. I'm sorry if it came across that way. For me, there is such a distinct difference between 132 and all of the rest of the Scriptures. And I do have my little hang-ups here and there, things that I'm like, I don't love how that sounds, you know, and I'm very willing to think critically about them, and I don't just accept it all. It's just 132 seems to be in its own completely different category, so that's why I was asking, like to me it would be like, whoa, Joseph jumped the shark with that one. That was completely out of character for him. And I, you know, and that seems kind of like a hard historical case to make, because Joseph faced a lot of stress in his life. So that's why I was kind of asking to just, you know, does that make sense to you, that it does seem quite different?
Yeah. I can understand that. Yeah.